great group of people we have to speak with you tonight. Next up, we'll have Jeff Norris. Jeff is a colleague of mine in the OES structure, the Office of Emergency Services. He is part of our neighbor to the north, the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services, and he's been there since 2004. He's also been with their search and rescue team way back, 1978. He's got obviously a vast wealth of experience and knowledge, and today he's going to focus on just a little bit of that, which is notification, the use of social media tools, and high-tech ways that we can all stay informed. And we really appreciate Jeff being here tonight.
Well, thank you and good evening. I'm Jeff Norris with the San Mateo County Office of Emergency Services, and San Mateo County and the City of Palo Alto work very closely on many projects. Our common border is a creek that you can step across 11 months out of the year, and that 1 month that you can't step across it, we worry about it every single day that it's going to flood our communities. So we've long known that no one way of notifying the public is going to be 100% effective. And that's why we have to start looking at alternative strategies of letting people know. We look at things such as sirens, which at the end of the Cold War, people were saying these things are obsolete, let's remove them. And now we look back and we're going, gee, those things weren't obsolete, we just hadn't realized how useful they are in notifying our communities. We started looking at landline telephones, and as much as they have started to become antiques, and the whole structure of landline telephone has changed dramatically over the last few years, in many communities, Palo Alto I believe is one of them, the only copper in your loop is that final mile. It's fiber optic up to that point. So landline telephones, but those are things which a third of you have given up. I did a quick look when you were raising your hands, but that's one of our tools that we use to get in touch with people. And then we've also looked at the traditional strategies. Just plain, oh yeah, I know, I chose that one deliberately. The officer with a loudspeaker, or the fire engine rolling through your community, or the neighbor who got the word who comes and bangs on your door and says, hey, did you hear about the disaster that's coming our way? So we start looking at it, and we have to take a multi-tiered approach to notifying communities. So we've come up with all kinds of great technologies to come up with these notifications. There's the Santa Clara Alert, San Mateo, the SMC Alert in San Mateo County, Alert SF, many different notification systems. We've tied into things like Nixle, which is as simple to sign up for as texting your zip code to 888-777. But those are alerting systems, and they're prone, they can break. We've also looked at the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. Now, this is a nationwide strategy that is operated and maintained as a joint agreement between cellular carriers, TV broadcasters, radio broadcasters, FEMA, and the FCC. And the idea is you see the crawl on the screen, or it interrupts the sound on your TV to announce the problem. Or it sends a text message such as the Amber Alerts that show up right on your opening screen of your phone. Many different systems, but no one system is going to reach everybody. And we've started to see a trend over the last several years, last decade or so, that many people are getting their notifications from their neighbors and their friends through social media systems. Now, Palo Alto has been extremely forward-thinking on that, and on that back table is this card, and everyone should pick up at least one of these on your way out. This has all of the social media strategies that the City of Palo Alto uses to provide news under normal circumstances and warnings when there's an emergency. So, continuing with the premise that no one system reaches 100% of the people, we start looking at the different social media systems. And we start seeing things like the traditional storyteller system, that's my colloquial term for them, our neighbor here in Menlo Park, Facebook. This is where people are telling their story of what's going on. And the Red Cross operates a web-based system called Safe and Well. And with Safe and Well, you can put in the name of a person you're concerned about, or you can put in your own name if you're in an impacted area. And it matches up people who are trying to find out if you're okay with the people who are being treated by the Red Cross. Safe and Well in about 2012 was doing thousands of entries per year. It's dropped to about 10% of its peak because people are using their own social media systems, and particularly the storyteller system, Facebook. They're telling their story after the fact. I was on the third story and you should have felt the house shake. So Safe and Well is kind of vanishing and it's being replaced by Facebook. And realistically, the folks at Facebook should be looking at a partnership with the Red Cross saying, you know what, why don't we host Safe and Well for people who don't have Facebook? It would be an ideal partnership. Then you start looking at other social media systems, and you get the more immediate blasted out message that isn't necessarily focused. It just goes out into the aether, and people who receive it, and those who don't. And you can track individuals and say, I want a notification when somebody sends out a Twitter tweet, or you can put geofences around it. And so Twitter has started to become a great tool for assessing what's going on in large-scale emergencies. Because you can create a geofence, basically chart on a map the electronic area you want to watch messages from, we can put that circle around an emergency and look for keywords. But even if we catch the keyword, it still needs somebody who's reading that message to assess it to see, is this somebody saying the story again? Is this somebody who was a first-hand witness of it? Was this somebody who was on board the train? And this actually became a peculiar circumstance in Southern California when one of their commuter trains derailed. The train stayed upright. A few people had some minor injuries. But there's a practice in triage where the engine captain or whoever's there first goes up to the door and says, if you can get up, come walk over here to me. And that way you get the people with the most minor injuries and you get them together first and you get them out to where they can get looked at, but you then leave the more seriously injured people behind. And this captain stands there in befuddlement looking back and forth in this train and nobody's moving. What he sees is a lot of this. And I've actually talked to this fellow. He gets this really shocked expression on his face every time he says this story. He then said, if you are on Twitter or social media, come to me. And all these people got up and walked down the aisle of the train to him. Social media had shaped their lives to where they were ignoring the instructions until the instructions fit that social media element into their life. And the expression on this guy's face, if you ever get a chance to hear him talk, it's priceless. But he realized at that moment, and a lot of emergency managers have realized since then, people get into their place in the world, and you have to sometimes break them out of that trend to get them to do what you need them to do. Now, theoretically, his other approach could have been, get on Twitter. If you're on train 193, the alternate approach to that. So, other systems, we start seeing many different approaches. So LinkedIn came along a few years ago, and it was a professional infrastructure. This was where you would post a resume or chart who you worked with, and you took that network that you developed 3, 5, if you're in the engineering field, 19 companies ago, and you took advantage of that network to find the next place that you might be going. Well, this has also become, once again, the storyteller approach, in that you start seeing those resumes changing over time, and people are now using LinkedIn to say what's eminently happening to them. Not the instantaneousness of Twitter, but they're putting out these messages saying, you know, and then on the 18th of this month, I went through this circumstance. Totally unrelated to their professional interests, but it's another source where they're telling their story and putting that information out. This one's Messenger. And Messenger is actually a very, very old system. And it's still around, still in active use, but it's one of those heritage systems that's still pinging out messages. And a few years ago, they broke its code, and they stopped it having character limits, and they broke the code, and they let it have pictures. And it's started to become a method by which people who get dispersed, you know, you knew this person because they were your neighbor a few years ago, and now they're living somewhere else. It's still being used for people to get in touch with each other. I have a lot of friends in Southern California and in Texas who still use Messenger to let me know what's happening. One of them being a young lady and her spouse who lives outside of Houston, who, when networks started to come back, they were outside of Houston. They didn't have phone or electricity, not because the storm had gotten to them, but because all of the infrastructure in Houston was damaged. When the network came back, she'd already put a message on the system. When Messenger finally was able to connect to the web, I got a message. So she'd actually put the message out 3 days before I ever saw it. But it was sitting there waiting to have network to connect through. So Messenger, it's an old system, but it's still very active. Then you start getting into this new class of social media. You start to see live stream and things like Periscope. And live stream is literally small video clips that people can transmit right now to anywhere. It gets archived on the network servers for a period of time. It's frequently archived also on the device that you shoot the video with. But it's where you can send an instantaneous video message. And the story that goes along with that one was I have a little electric scooter. It does about 20 miles an hour. It's probably one of the most dangerous things I've ever owned in my life. And I have a buddy in Milpitas, and he wanted to experiment with latency over the cellular system. I said, sure, I'll put on Periscope and I'll drive around the park. So I clip the phone to the front of my scooter, and I go around through the park. Okay, over here's the soccer field, over here's this. And I'm seeing stuff scrolling up as he's saying, oh, okay, what's that over on the left? Okay, well, this is... And I'm doing a narrative. I'm doing basically a narrative opportunity while he's looking at the pictures live. So then I decide to go home, and I turn onto a street that's really in need of repaving, and I get to an discontinuity in the pavement, and I fell out of the tree as I flipped end over twice. So I pick up the phone, and here's a message from my buddy. So I know where you're at. Are you okay? Do you need me to send help? Because he'd watched me crash. He saw me fall out of the tree, and because it's geocoded, he knew exactly where I was. So he could have called the fire department locally and said, hey, my buddy just crashed, he's at this intersection, or he's near this intersection. You know, look for the oak tree with a dent and a guy hanging in it. So instantaneous video started to become a reality a few years ago. And this has actually been used in a number of emergency situations where, actually a local instance, we had a fire at a warehouse up in Millbrae not too long ago. And the fire captain on the back of the building scanned around with live stream. The battalion chief who was sitting in front was looking at it, seeing what the fire captain was seeing in the back of the building. So he had that instantaneous idea of how much problem is in the front of the building, how much is in the back. and could start assessing where to send his resources to best take advantage of those capabilities. Instagram. Instagram's original concept was a photo with one sentence. Because a picture's worth 1,000 words, why do you need more than one sentence? And people started using Instagram. Well, Instagram has actually grown a little bit, and once again, they all start evolving over time. They took away that idea of one sentence. Okay, go ahead and write a whole paragraph. Oh, you don't want to attach just one picture. Okay, here's a dozen pictures. But it becomes another means by which people are sending these instantaneous messages to their circle of friends. And then we start getting things like Telegram. And Telegram came about to do group messaging. Its original concept was that it was basically a party line, and you would invite a number of people into a group. And the original envisionment of Telegram was it was going to be used by companies, different departments, to have virtual meetings. And it diverged from that about as soon as it went available on the web, and went to being groups planning when they were going to meet for dinner. And it found a million uses beyond what they originally envisioned it for. But it's a group message strategy to where one person can talk to many. What it lacks is a geocoding. So if somebody says, you know, I'm in trouble here, we can't really tell where they're at based on that system. So picking up the slack from where Telegram had left its business strategy, you end up with Slack coming around. And Slack was yet another social media strategy. And their idea was you got invited into a group and we'd hold a business meeting on Slack. Well, you start seeing conventions using Slack to have different departments able to chat together and coordinate things. And then you started seeing Slack diverge just like Telegram had. And now you see, oh, the department now has a subgroup of the folks who like to go bowling. And it's gone the same path. It expanded. The one-to-many conversation strategy, yet another party line communication system. Then the young folks came along and said, we like Slack and we like Telegram, but it's old school. So they came up with Kik. And Kik is one of those things that did not want to be local. In fact, in their concept, they want to be as unlocal as possible. So your nearest person you chat with on Kik might be in Great Britain. That's not unusual. But Kik groups started to become based on different things that people like to do together. I recently saw there's actually a Kik group for ham radio operators who don't want to spin around the dial looking for each other. They throw out a message on Kik and say, at 6 o'clock in the evening, I'll be on 14.68 megahertz. So, yet another system. Then, since we're crowdsourcing information, along comes another one of our local companies, and they came up with Waze. And Waze was a rather interesting concept, because if you can crowdsource news, why can't you crowdsource traffic information? And Waze relies on positionally aware phones in your vehicle while you're driving, and it charts how fast you're going. So if you're on Highway 101 and you're moving at 4 miles an hour, they can calculate out, and they've used some very smart algorithms in Waze. They actually are predetermining the impact areas. Because if you've got 100 people driving on Highway 101, and the person furthest south is going 4 miles an hour, and the person who's 6 miles back is going 11 miles an hour, you can start building a model and calculating how roadways run. And they actually had a vested interest in creating Waze because they were planning how their own buses that were moving their employees would be dynamically rerouted. So if they saw a traffic jam starting to form, they would start sending messages to their bus drivers, get off of 101, take Woodside Road and get onto 280. They would start routing them around intelligently based on, so they were using all of the public to collect the information and using that to decide where their buses were going to go. So that's one of those slick strategies that came out not too long ago. Actually, Waze is relatively new, I think about 2 years. It was in testing about 3 years ago, but it's been publicly available for about 2 years. So this all leads to information overload, because this is just scratching the surface of all of the different social media systems that are out there. They way outnumber us in this room. There are more social media systems than there are people in this room, with ease. And social media starts to become a very difficult thing to deal with. Initially, public safety started looking that social media was okay. We could push out the routine news. This thing is happening, we're expecting some weather, there's a trend, this roadway is going to be closed for accidents. And they started thinking of it as a one-way system to push that out. Well, about 3, 4, 5 years ago, they realized that social media is actually a two-way street. Public information officers, and Ken reminds us that we, without acronyms, we have plenty of them, PIO, public information officers, can push information out, public news, updates, circumstances surrounding an emergency. And the public, if they're analyzing this data, can be sending information back to them. But you have different kinds of information coming back from the general public via these social media platforms. And some of it is eyewitness reports. It's fantastic. You've got somebody who's actually there, who saw it happen, who can tell you what they saw in those first few minutes, and that gives you a jump on the problem. Because the better you can assess the problem, the better you can respond to it. But we also end up with rumors coming in through through social media systems. And there's even some malicious individuals who send intentional misinformation, because there's no gatekeepers, there's no moderators. So I honestly see in our public information officers and our joint information systems in the not too distant future, there's going to be a split. There's going to be intelligence and analysis, where that person's going to be doing nothing but watching social media with a geofence around a problem. And then the rest of the public information office and joint information system is going to be crafting the messages that they're sending out to the public. Take advantage of those many, many thousands of eyes who can see what's going on when we can't, to better assess and build a better model of what's going on. So once again, I'd like to remind everybody, these cards in the back of the room, I wish my county would do the same thing. I'm going to take a few with me and talk to my folks to try to get them to do the same. Please do pick up at least one of these cards, because it has all the social media platforms that the city of Palo Alto is currently using. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Did we want to open it up for some questions? Or?
We'll do it at the very end.
Oh, okay, very good. So thank you very much.